The whole world, from San Francisco to Tokyo to Beijing to Bangalore to right here in Singapore, is spending enormous amounts of money on artificial intelligence before the revenue shows up. Some of that will look like genius in 5 years. A lot of it will look like the most expensive lesson a generation of investors ever paid for. When a company raises hundreds of millions of dollars before it has a product in the market, is that smart money seeing the future early? Or is it the dumbest money in history dressed up in a lab coat? Southeast Asia might be the best market on the planet for edge AI for reasons that have nothing to do with Silicon Valley. In Singapore right now, there's a company that has raised close to $500 million and has never sold a single thing. No revenue. Not a small amount of revenue, none. It has a chip, it has a box, it has a founder story, a very serious set of engineers, and one of the bigger names in Singaporean VC writing the check. What it does not have yet is a customer you can name or a price you can look up. And here's the part that should make you sit up and listen. That is not a scandal. In 2026, that's a business model. So today we're going to talk about a Singapore chip startup called Acrab. But Acrab is really just the door. Behind it is a much bigger question, one that every founder and every investor listening to this needs an answer to. When a company raises hundreds of millions of dollars before it has a product in the market, is that smart money seeing the future early? Or is it the dumbest money in history dressed up in a lab coat? And underneath that, an even more practical question, this whole idea of running powerful artificial intelligence on a little box on your desk instead of in the cloud, is that real? Or is it a slide in a pitch deck? So let me walk you through it. I'm Kevin Brocklin. This is Sea of Startups. Real, raw, relatable as always. So, quick roadmap because I want you to follow the logic, not just the numbers. And there's 3 parts here. So, first, the box. What Acrab actually is, what it actually built, and more importantly, what we can prove versus what we are being told. I went and pulled the claims apart so you don't have to. And the second, the money. Because before you laugh at $500 million for a company with no revenue, I want you to see what is happening in San Francisco, in Tokyo, in Beijing, and in Bangalore right now. Acrab is not the strange one. Acrab is the small one. Third, the actual technology, edge AI. I'm going to explain it in as plain of language as I can and tell you where it is genuinely working, tell you where the hype is running ahead of the physics, and then give you my honest read on whether this specific bet makes sense for us here in Southeast Asia. By the end, you will be able to make your own call, and that is the whole point. Let me start with the box. On the 6th of August, a Singapore company called Acrab closed a $130 million Series B. It was led by Vertex Ventures together with Vertex Growth. Now, hold that name Vertex in your head. We're coming back to it later, and it is an interesting thing in this entire story. So that round took Acrab past $480 million in total funding. The company was only founded in 2024. It came out of stealth in June this year, and honestly, it wasn't on my radar. Maybe I'm not in the right circles for the chips or whatever. But I only heard about it recently, and it has, by its own description, visible paths to industrial deployments and expects revenue within 2026. So listen back to that last part that I said. Expects revenue within 2026, which is a very polite, very well layered, let's call it well lawyered way of saying we have not made any money yet. So what did they build? This is where it gets genuinely interesting, and I do not want to be so cynical about the engineering because engineering looks pretty real. They built a chip called GELIX. Not sure if that's pronounced as an acronym or if we should be calling it GELIX, but it's the GELIX one. I'm going to call it GELIX. It is a system on a chip built on a 5 nanometer process, which is serious modern manufacturing node. It pairs a 20 core ARM processor with a dedicated neural processing unit, and it has 273 gigabytes per second of unified memory bandwidth. If none of those words mean anything to you, here is my attempt at a translation. This is a real high-end piece of silicon, not a science project. And they built a product around it called Agent Box. So you can think of it as a small computer that sits on your desk and runs AI models locally on the device without sending your data off to some data center in the cloud. Acrab says it is designed to support models in the 100 billion parameter class. Persistent memory, multimodal, agents that actually do things, all running on the box in front of you. That is the pitch. Now let me do the part that I actually get paid to do, which is not believe the pitch. So here's the headline number they are putting out. They ran a benchmark and they claim their chip processed a prompt at 1,416 tokens per second against 189 on a Mac Mini with an M4 Pro chip. So roughly 7.5 times faster than a high-end Apple machine. Sounds incredible, yeah? And it might be, but let me tell you what that number actually is, because this is where you earn the right to have an opinion. That measurement is something called prefill. And prefill is the speed at which the machine reads and digests your question before it starts answering. It is the reading phase, not the writing phase. It is genuinely useful, but it is one half of the job. The other half, the part where the machine actually generates the answer word by word, is called decode. And Acrab, as far as I could find, has not published its decode speed. It is not published time to first token. It is not published power consumption. It is not published thermal data. And crucially, nobody independent has verified any of this. Every one of these numbers so far, at least as far as I can find, probably because they only recently came out of stealth, all of these numbers are coming from Acrab themselves. So just take that into context as I talk about this, because I have not independently verified and I have not been able to find anybody who hasn't been able to independently verify. Even the tech press that covered it flagged this openly. The claim is prefill only. It is not proof the chip is 7.5 times faster at everything. It is proof the chip is fast at one specific thing in one specific test that the company designed. And that 100 billion parameter claim, the one that makes the headline, notice the wording, designed to support, not runs, not we measured it running 100 billion parameter model at this speed while drawing this many watts, designed to support. That is a target from my reading of it, not a result. I am not saying that they're lying. I want to be very clear about that. I'm saying that as of the day I'm recording this, the GELIX 1 is in validation. It is chasing its first industrial adoption. And the first market they are going after is the smart cockpit inside cars. No named customer, no public price. Revenue is a forecast. So here is your honest scorecard on Acrab, the product. Real chip, real team, one genuinely fast benchmark on the reading half of the task, and a whole set of numbers that would actually tell you if this works quietly missing. Now, who is behind it? Because this is where the story stops being about a box and starts being about something much bigger. You started a company to build a product, not to run a back office. But here you are. You pay an accounting firm every month, and once a year, you get a clean set of accounts. That is compliance. It's not clarity. It will not tell you if you run out of cash in March. It will not tell you what one new hire does to your runway. And it will not answer the question every investor asks: where's this business heading? So I built your CFO, your back office in a box. Your books keeps your accounting books current, and your CFO puts your forecast forward. In one login, your actuals flowing straight into your Outlook. Link your strategic initiatives, like a hire or a price change, to exactly what it does to your runway before you commit. Investor ready, operationally ready, in the currency that you work in. It is the back office I run across my own companies. Get your finances settled for your business today at yourcfo.tech. That's yourcfo.tech. So before I tell you who runs Acrab, let me widen the lens, because I promised you that $500 million for a company with no revenue is not strange in 2026. So let me prove that portion first. Let's start in San Francisco. There's a company called Safe Superintelligence, which was founded by Ilya Sutskever, who was the chief scientist at OpenAI, a name that some of you listening may be familiar with. That company raised $2 billion at a $32 billion valuation. It has around 50 employees, but at the time of that funding, it had no product. It has published no research, and it has said out loud on purpose that it does not intend to ship anything until its mission is complete. NVIDIA is one of its backers. $2 billion, 50 people, nothing to sell. By design. Then there is Thinking Machines, which was founded by Mira Murati, who is the chief technology officer at OpenAI. Roughly $2 billion at a $12 billion valuation. Then another $5 billion at a $50 billion valuation. To its credit, it did finally ship a model in July, but it raised the first $2 billion on a founder's name and a thesis, not on a product. And this is not a fringe thing. In 2025, OpenAI and Anthropic between them soaked up around 14% of every venture dollar invested anywhere on Earth. Anthropic is valued now closing in on $1 trillion. Maybe by the time that this is aired, maybe it's surpassed it. The money is not spread out. It is piling into a handful of bets on faith. So that is America. Now, here's where I actually wanted to do this episode, because Asia is running a kind of the exact same playbook, and almost nobody here is really talking about it that way. Because if you go to Tokyo, there's a company called Sakana AI. It raised at a valuation of $2.65 billion, which makes it the most valuable startup in Japan. And here's the kind of the beautiful part. Sakana's entire philosophy is small. Cheap, efficient models that work on small data sets, tuned to the Japanese language and Japanese business. One of its founders, Liana Jones, is literally one of the authors of the original research paper that created the modern AI boom. Rich valuation, thin revenue, sold on a pedigree and a thesis that says bigger is not always better. Sit with that, because it is the same bet Acrab is making. The anti-giant, do more with less bet. Go to Beijing. Moonshot AI raised 2 billion at a 20 billion valuation, is reportedly chasing 30. But here's the twist, and this is the one that should sting. Moonshot is not pre-revenue. Its annual recurring revenue passed $200 billion from what I was able to find. Its rivals, Zipu and Minimax, already went public in Hong Kong. The Chinese champions are not raising on faith. They are raising and making money and listing on the exchange. Go over to Bangalore. India has decided AI is a sovereignty issue. A company called Sarvam raised $234 million at a $1.5 billion valuation, led by Indian IT giant. And Ola's founder is building a company called Krutram that is not just making models, it is building its own chips and its own computing infrastructure. That is a direct echo of what Acrab is doing, wrapped in the flag of national self-reliance. So put the map together. Silicon Valley is doing pre-product on pure faith. Japan is pricing efficiency on pedigree. China is already making money and ringing the opening bell. India is treating this as a matter of national security. And Southeast Asia's entry into this whole contest is a box from Singapore that runs AI models on your desk. Which brings me to the one distinction I need you to hold on to, because it is the difference between a lazy take on this and what I think is a more correct one. Pre-revenue is not the same as pre-product. Safe superintelligence has literally nothing to ship on purpose. Acrab has a chip already and a box, and a chip company is not a model company. Silicon costs a fortune before you make a single dollar, because you have to design it and manufacture it long before anyone can buy it. That R&D, that process. So if you're going to judge Acrab, do not judge it against Software Lab in California. Judge it against a Sakana in Tokyo or Krutram in Bangalore. Judge it against the other people trying to build hardware and sovereignty in Asia. I think that's the more fair fight. And now, finally, who runs it? The chief executive of Acrab is Dr. Ken Fua. And maybe I'm brutalizing the pronunciation of his name, and I apologize on that. But Ken Fua is the former co-chief executive of ARM China. He spent 2 decades at ARM, and he stepped in to co-run its China business in 2020 during a very messy boardroom fight. So let that land. The technical brain of this Singaporean deep tech champion learned his trade at the top of ARM China. I want to be careful and fair because this is exactly the kind of thing the show exists to say out loud without turning it into a smear. This is a real world-class credential. It is not a red flag on its own, but it is the same thread we pulled on with Manas and with Day One, Data Center, and when something is wearing a Singapore jersey, it's always worth asking where the engine was actually built. And here the engine has an ARM China lineage. There's also a small mystery I could not fully close. A couple of outlets named someone called Tianxi as the 2024 founder, and that name appears almost nowhere else, while Ken Fua is the public face. So I'm flagging it, not asserting it. If you know who actually else is in there, let me know. Again, maybe it's because they just came out of stealth that it's hard to find too many pieces of data on it. But I flag it because if there is any heritage when they were still in stealth of being born, bred, and grown in China, the question is, are we going to end up coming into a Manus-like scenario now that it's sitting in Singapore? I don't know. Just kind of speculation at this point, raising it because that's a relatively recent episode. So, right. Okay. Let me answer the question the whole thing hangs on. Is Edge AI real or is it pitch deck fantasy? So first, gonna attempt it plain language here. Edge AI just means running the model on the device in front of you. That's Edge. Instead of sending your request over the internet to a giant data center and waiting for the answer to bounce back to you. On the box, not in the cloud. That is the whole idea. So why would you want that? Well, there's a handful of reasons, and they're all real. Speed, because there is no round trip to a server. Privacy, because your data never leaves the building. Cost, because you're not paying a cloud bill every time that you ask a question. And it works when the internet does not. And this is a real market, not a fantasy. The edge AI chip market is worth somewhere around $4.5 billion this year and growing more than 20% a year. NVIDIA already controls close to 40% of it, and it went and bought one of the most exciting inference chip companies just to own more of it. This is not nothing. Serious people are putting serious money here. But here's where I have to be honest with you, because this is the crack in the Acrab story that nobody in the press release is really going to point out. The sweet spot for running AI on a device is small models. The industry even has a nickname for it. It's like the Goldilocks zone. Models in the range of 7 to 13 billion parameters with a bit of clever compression. A 4 billion parameter model can fit in under 2 gigabytes and run on your phone. And these small models are shockingly good. There's a documented case of a fine-tuned model with under 3 billion parameters beating a model more than 200 times its size on a specific business task. The research firm Gartner thinks that within a couple of years, companies will use these small task-specific models 3 times more than giant general-purpose ones. So the direction of travel is clear. On device, small and specialized beats big in general. Good. Now look back at Akrab's headline, 100 billion parameters. On a box, that is not necessarily what is already established as talked about as the Goldilocks zone. That is an order of magnitude beyond where the rest of the field says the sweet spot is. So one of two things is true. Either Acrab has a genuine architectural breakthrough that lets it do something the rest of the industry cannot, in which case show me the decode speed, show me the watts, and let someone independent test it, and I'll be the first to celebrate. I'll be standing up and clapping. Or the 100 billion number is marketing, running out ahead of the physics. Right now, with the numbers they have released, I cannot tell you which, and neither can they on the public evidence. Now, let me make the case for why this could actually work here, because I do not want to leave you only with the skepticism. This is the part I am generally trying to be constructive about. Southeast Asia might be the best market on the planet for edge AI for reasons that have nothing to do with Silicon Valley. Data sovereignty is becoming law here. 89% of Indonesian enterprises now say keeping their data in their own country is a key factor in their technology decisions. And you hear the same whether you go to Malaysia, whether you go to the Philippines, whether you go to Thailand. ASEAN is actively pursuing this. And the region runs on patchy connectivity and expensive cloud bills. Put those together, data that must stay onshore, internet you cannot always trust, and a cloud invoice that kind of hurts. And running the model locally on a box stops being a gimmick and starts being the obvious answer. That is not a California idea imported here. That is a genuinely regional fit. Which brings me back to that name I told you to hold on to, Vertex. Here's the thing most people don't necessarily discuss or throw around, but Vertex, the venture firm leading this round, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Temasek. And Temasek is owned by the government of Singapore. So peel back one layer, and the marquee backer of this deal is effectively the Singapore government. And the state is not being shy about it. In this year's budget, Singapore committed $800 million just to semiconductor research. inside a $37 billion national research plan. It is merging its investment arms specifically to fund deep tech. So let me reframe this whole episode for you as succinctly as I can. Acrab is not really a startup story. It is an industrial policy wearing a startup jersey. Singapore has looked at a world where AI is a matter of national power, where chips are the new oil, and it has decided it wants to own a piece of the silicon. So it is putting state money through a state fund into a chip company run by the former co-chief executive of ARM China. At the exact moment, it is pouring billions into semiconductors nationally. This is a country building a strategic asset and calling it a Series B round. And honestly, well, once you see it that way, it is a better story and a more defensible one. This is not uh, foreign IP quietly flipping through Singapore to dodge the geopolitics rules to sell to U.S. buyers, which is a pattern that we've criticized in the past before. This is the opposite. This is Singapore deliberately hiring armed China talent to build something it intends to keep. So the honest question stops being, is Acrab a real startup? It clearly is a real engineering effort. The honest question becomes, is this a smart sovereign bet? Or is it the state paying startup prices and startup multiples for a national champion at once for reasons that are not purely financial? So here is my actual take, for whatever it is worth, from someone who writes small checks for a living, not state-size ones. The category, Edge AI, is very, very real. Small models on real devices work today, and Southeast Asia has better reasons to want them than almost anywhere else. So I am not bearish on this idea. What I am cautious about is the specific claim and the specific price. $500 million, no revenue, a benchmark that only measures half the job, a flagship number that sits well outside where the rest of the field says the physics work, and a cap table that traces back to the government. None of that is disqualifying. All it means, you keep your applause ready, but you keep your hands still until the independent numbers show up. Applaud that Southeast Asia finally has serious hardware, has a serious hardware bet with real talent and real state ambition behind it. Then ask them for the decode speed, the power draw, and the name of one paying customer. If those show up and they are good, this is one of the most important companies in the region. If they keep not showing up, then what you have is a very expensive, very well-credentialed box that a government wanted to exist. That is the episode. Let me leave you with the one line I want you to take into your next investor meeting or your next board call. Pre-revenue is not pre-product, and a benchmark you cannot reproduce is not a benchmark. It is a poster. The whole world, from San Francisco to Tokyo to Beijing to Bangalore to right here in Singapore, is spending enormous amounts of money on artificial intelligence before the revenue shows up. Some of that will look like genius in 5 years. A lot of it will look like the most expensive lesson a generation of investors ever paid for. Your job, my job, is to tell the difference before the money moves, not after. Acrab might be the real thing. The Singapore government clearly thinks the category is worth owning. I just want to see the other half of the numbers before it starts saying that it's a winner. If this was useful, you know what to do. Tell one founder or one investor who needs to hear it. I read every reply. Until next week, keep it real, keep it raw, keep it relatable. I will see you then. And that does it for this episode of Sea of Startups. If you've enjoyed what you've been listening to, please give it a like, give it a review, subscribe to our channel. A little bit of feedback goes a long way in allowing us to keep on putting out these kind of episodes.